Meeting come to order. Dr. Versta.
Yes, great October 2nd, board and staff, guests at the Southwest ISD. I would like to ask Ms. Janice Hernandez if she will lead us in the invocation and followed by our pledge of allegiance to start our session.
Please rise. Almighty God, allow us to collectively bring reflection and wisdom to our meeting. May we use our expertise and our judgment to contribute to the well-being of our students and the families that we serve. May we be listeners more than speakers, and may we always have in mind your will for the future of our district. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez.
All right. Board members, we're going to move down to Halsworth under items of information to begin with.
Yes, sir. If you need some more time, Dr. Fay, we can do the action item. Do you need time to bring that up? Are you ready?
I'm ready. We're ready.
So we'll
Kate's
move
here.
there, then we'll come back to the, we have two action items today, so we'll move into the items of information. I know that we've got some friends from Holdsworth with us, and I think everyone in the room is aware of the work we're doing with Holdsworth and creating our leadership definition in Southwest ISD and kind of moving forward with how we build capacity and identify leaders and build transparency into our system and this tall glass of water. Thank Dr. Fay for being the district champion and leading that on many fronts. We also have Kate Rogers, the president of Holdsworth's Leadership Center, joining us today, and she's going to provide information. We have Katie Jaron with us, who is a frequent visitor to Southwest ISD, and we have two of our campus principals who are joining us, Rosie Hidalgo, Brian Penarts, who have just onboarded with Holdsworth this past summer and also returning recently from a leadership opportunity in New York. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fay as the champion, and I think she is going to kind of bring us up to date where we are, what are some of the things we're working on. She's going to test everyone if you know our leadership definition to the nth degree, and I'll let her present today.
And so we are honored to actually present to our board today. And very honored to actually co-present with Kate Rogers, which is probably a dream come true for most people. And so thank you, Kate, for allowing me to do this with you. And thank you, Brian and Rosie, for being here at a last-minute juncture and creating your 30-second elevator speech. And so first on the agenda is going to be Kate Rogers, and she will begin. And then I will get into kind of the work of the district and where we are so that our board knows where we're going. Go ahead. Thanks.
So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you to the board and to everyone for this tremendous partnership. We are thrilled to have Southwest ISD as part of this first cohort, having Lloyd and Dr. Fay and all of the fabulous team from central office and now the principals participating with us. So we thank you for your commitment. We know it's been time away from the district for these folks, but we're very optimistic about what that partnership will yield for the district over the long term. And we really see our role as building on the tremendous foundation that already exists here in Southwest ISD. So how do we come in and even help add more velocity to the work that's already underway? So a little bit of background on the Holdsworth Center. So the concept for the Holdsworth Center was a long time in the making, right? Almost 2 years. So Charles Butt, as the funder and founder, pulled together a group of national experts on education and said, I want to make a legacy gift to the state of Texas, something for our public schools that will be theirs for forever. And I want it to be focused on leadership. And why did he say that? Because there's been a lot of research as of late that says second only to the quality of the teacher in the classroom, which is the most important thing in terms of how well students perform, is the quality of leadership on the campus and at the district level. So you'll see this research from the Wallace Foundation at the bottom, which we really like, that says highly effective principals can raise achievement in their schools by as much as 2 to 7 months of learning in a single year. So just like we see the research says that a great teacher can really make up a gap in a single year, or we can have the opposite effect. The same is true of the campus principal. And that's why our focus is to make sure that after 5 years that the district has a very robust pipeline and a bench of folks across the district who are ready and willing to serve should that need arise from within the district. And also, the district has been working on some really innovative ways to build leadership at the teacher level and give folks an opportunity to sort of spread their leadership wings even before they get into an administrative role. So we had this idea that was formed by the organizing board. They visited places all over the world. So both education systems and even private companies, as well as the Army War College, for example, to learn about best practice in leadership. The group also conducted a number of focus groups with both superintendents and principals from around the state. And this is just really, look at the math. Texas needs 10,000 principals and superintendents. So what we heard from superintendents and principals alike was that when a role comes open, it can be hard to find a highly qualified candidate to step into that role. And so that's kind of the idea behind Holsworth, is that we will help the district to create a systemic approach to leadership development, moving from sort of a reactive mode to a more proactive mode over the 5 years that we work together. So you'll see this quote specifically from a superintendent on the right that says, "We're all fighting over the same candidates." And certainly in a community like San Antonio, where we have 16 school districts fighting with one another, the talent wars can be a bit dramatic. So the 3 programs that we offer to the district over the 5 years are, first and foremost, the district leadership program. So that's 2 years in its duration, which has literally flown by. So we're already well into year 2. And believe it or not, Dr. Verstuff and Dr. Fay are going to graduate next spring, which we're super excited about. And then we welcomed our first campus leadership cohort this summer, and we will welcome a new cohort of principals from Southwest ISD every single year during the 5 years of the partnership to be able to touch the majority of principals within the district. And really the focus there is on strengthening their current leadership and really making sure that they have a robust vision for the future for both their staff members and their children that we can help bring to light on the campus. We think that one of the things that makes Holsworth different are people like Katie. It's the district support team who are actually embedded in the district, working in the district 2 to 3 days per week, so that in between the learning sessions when they're spending time with us, we keep everything moving forward and helping to build capacity around implementation support, etc. So we think that's kind of the secret sauce, if you will, of Holsworth, and those are the way the 3 programs lay out. This is a snapshot of how, over the 5 years, how we will work our way down from central office, down to the campus level, and touch, as we said, the majority of leaders across the district. But I always say it doesn't just stop with the people that are directly involved in the program, right? Through principal meetings, through AP meetings, through other things that happen in the district. And I think both Dr. Verstuff and Dr. Fay have been quite creative in spreading the learning to others in the districts, teachers, and even other types of staff throughout the district, which is a big part. So folks always say, but if you only touch 50 to 60% of the leaders, I say that's not actually accurate. Maybe those are the people who participate or leave their campuses to come away for the learning sessions, but we're actually touching virtually the whole staff within the district, and they've done an excellent job of engaging a wide array of staff members in the development of the leadership definition, which you guys have just recently launched. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Fay and just say once again how honored we are to have Southwest among the districts included in this first cohort. from all the districts across the state. You guys were one of 7, and we're just very honored to stand alongside you in this work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so the Campus Leadership Program actually mirror images some of the work that we're doing around the 4 themes. And the training that our principals and their teams just got involved with beginning in the summer was around personal leadership, effective teams, aligned systems and structures, and you will see a lot of that in just a few minutes, and then change leadership. And within those themes, which I believe our principals just got back from the IPL Institute in Columbia University working with Hitendra, seeking opportunities to grow, models sustainable leadership, and communicates effectively. And I'm sure y'all worked on communication a great deal during that session. When we're looking at effective teams, works effectively with teams, with members of your team, creates an environment where team members are willing to take risk. When you have as much talent as we do in our system, if you don't have this environment where people are really willing to take some risk and put out new ideas, you become an ineffective team. Leveraging team strengths and styles, and I think that's probably a big thing that I've learned is that I don't have to be the strength for everything, and neither does Lloyd, but we have lots of people around us to help us drive the work of the district forward. And I'm gonna wait on the aligned systems and structures for the very end because it'll lead us right into the next session. But change leadership is about diagnosing problems, not just, we know that we have this terrible outcome and fixing the outcome. It's about diagnosing what happened deep down in the system so that we can change that to create better outcomes. Engaging teams in problem solving and decision making, that's been a huge part of the work I know the DLP team is learning that there are actually decision-making protocols that we can use so that the decision doesn't always lie in one person's lap alone. It's a lonely place to be. And then support staff through a change process. The work that the DLP is actually really getting involved with now is aligned systems and structures, and that's developing systems that improve learning for our kids. And that's not always about what's happening in each individual classroom. That's is what's happening in our entire system. Studying world-class examples, which we have been just blessed with Holdsworth and learning about that. And then create structures for distributed leadership, and that'll be next in line when I present on that. But before we do that, we had this idea that it would be great for our board to hear from the 2 principals who have just began their journey with Holdsworth. And I had this kind of sidewalk conversation with Brian the other day when we were landing the helicopter and with our kids at Bob Hope Elementary. And he made this comment out in the heat. He says, "I feel like I'm living in a dream, that someone would take the kind of time to invest in me as a leader. So thank you." And so on that note, I'm going to turn it over to first Brian, since I probably stole his 30-second thunder, and then we'll let you hear from Rosie.
It's all right. All I need is another 30 seconds. I do feel blessed to be a part of Holdsworth. Holdsworth is special. In the last 13 years in education, I've been through all sorts of PD, and Holdsworth is a true leadership program. Their employees are just top-notch. And the people they brought in to talk to us are world-renowned. And so when you have that kind of opportunity to fly us up to New York and to let us meet with someone like Hitendra Wadhwa is very special. And so that's not lost on us. We did get to visit New York schools up there. We took some trips out to the schools, and we learned a lot about the way, we just learned a lot about possibilities. And so it's been a great experience. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Rosie, drum roll.
Forget about it. That's what I heard in New York. But
And coffee.
yeah, and coffee. But first of all, I just want to let you know that in my 30-some-odd years of education, this is probably the best experience I've had with my personal growth. And it has to do because I think Holdsworth invests in this personal leadership style in terms of making our schools better and helping our teachers be better. And how do we do that? We do that by finding out what kind of leaders we are. So that investment in our personal leadership role I think is monumental when we talk about our association with Holsworth. To have collaboration with other school districts and hear from different perspectives of what they're going through, just the same stuff we're going through. Maybe they have 40,000 students, but they are dealing with the same issues we're dealing with, and those conversations were critical. But the most important thing for me that I walked away with is that whole working at your highest potential. And how can you lead others, and how can you improve things, and how can you make things better if you don't know what kind of leader you are? And the whole trip to New York was about our personal leadership and our growth and our development, our mindset, and everything else that helps us to just stop everything we're doing and reflect on what are we doing? What are we doing to become that best leader that we can be, and how are we representing not only our district but Holsworth in that work? So we are very blessed to have Holsworth working with us, and I just want to continue to develop our purpose not only at our school but also in our district. I think we're headed to great things, and I think it starts with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nicely done. Obviously, you know why they were selected. And on that note, a little bit about the work that went into selecting them, which is not part of the presentation, but I think it's of good note for the board to hear, is that it was a very competitive process that was led by Dalila and Patty. Teams had to apply, not just the principal had to apply. And so that selection process is one that we can prototype and carry on to other roles in the district, and when we're making changes in specific divisions, is that we actually have a process for getting that work done now. And so thank you, Dalila, and thank you, Patty, for making sure that that work was completed well. And so so the real work, and I think this is something that we're probably all ready to dive into as a system, is now what? Is that we've spent a year, roughly a year and a half, learning with Holsworth as a DLP. Our campus principals are coming on board, but really, how does that change the work of the district? And I think Holsworth strategically kept us kind of corralled in because one of the thing about all 7 districts is that we all want to move very fast, but unless that movement and that work is based on something very foundational, it might all be for naught. And so I'm going to bring this up. We look at this house quite a bit. We're looking at it a lot less now. But one of the things that we had to do first was actually define what leadership was for Southwest ISD, and that took us a year to do. And so understanding that we could have sat probably in our very first session in June, the first summer, and just created our own and as a team, and we move forward. But that's not how it happened. That happened based on a survey, based on focus group. Probably over 600 people in the district helped create that. And it was a year-long process of back and forth between steering groups and the DLP group to make sure that we got it right. And when we unveiled it, that was going to be what was going to be a long-lasting definition in our system for years to come, even when I'm retired and watching my kids probably work in this system. And so if you look here, though, leadership definition is a foundation, but there's other things that we're going to begin working on. And this is, for me, really, really exciting, because I think that if I've learned anything in the last 3 months being back in AHR, that there's a real desire of our board to have a quality bench, so that when we're actually moving to a place where we need to select a new principal for a campus, is that we have a bench that's ready to go, and that our selection process isn't based on intuition. And so we're excited about the work to come. And so currently in our system, and thank you, Katie, for breaking this up a little bit in the presentation. It was real busy. You'll see that in just a second. Currently in our system, most people that get into leadership are people that self-select. I wanted to be a leader, so what I did was I did exactly what everybody in this room probably did. Number one, was I enrolled in a certification program on my own. I potentially got myself involved, or maybe a principal that I worked with got me involved in doing some stretch leadership roles, maybe something that wasn't aligned to girls basketball or teaching in CTE, but was maybe worried about being on the campus improvement team. So maybe I had an extension opportunity on a campus. 3 is I go sit in a classroom and I get told what to do from a book. That's most of the way. And then 4 is receive certification from an outside program. We have several of them: Texas A&M, UTSA, UT Austin. I mean, you name it, we've got them. Apply to become an AP. And then I get selected based on my resume and based on my interviews. And then all of a sudden, you see this big shift in what you have to know and be able to do to be successful, as maybe you felt you were successful at that lower level. And so then, and this is, if you look on the bottom, this spectrum of going from a teacher to a principal, is that in this, where you see that first little blue box, and I don't have a pointer, I don't think, or maybe I do, I can turn it on here, is there's a big shift in what you need to be able to know and do, and it moves from more of a technical side to more of a leadership, more of a, and I'm looking for a word, but it's different than just knowing how to pull up an Excel file and learning how to find a student in your system. The leadership that's required at that level is just very different. And so then you go along this spectrum of being an AP, and you go to work every day and you perform your roles as assigned by whoever your campus leader is. Sometimes that I've done many roles. I've done testing, I've done books, I've done discipline, I've done all kinds of things as an AP. I've been a dean. Your leadership develops, your skills develop over time by depending on what campus you go to or whoever your mentor is. I was very fortunate. I had a great mentor. Then you apply to become a principal. And then principals are selected based on resume and based on the interview process. And then all of a sudden, not only do you have this big shift in what you're supposed to learn, know, and be able to do, but now you have to lead an entire organization, and you have to lead them through a change process. And that's just very difficult to do. And I think Southwest ISD is very fortunate. We've had some really wonderful teachers who have moved through our system and become our leaders at our campuses, and it's been a pretty good process. But as we look to the future, and we look to people that we want to lead our campuses, I think it's safe to say we want more. We want quality leadership in every one of our schools that we know is when they get into that building that they're going to be able to lead at a pace and a rate that is good enough for our kids. And I think that's a great place to be. And so this is kind of our 2022 vision of how we would like to recreate a pipeline to the principalship at Southwest ISD. Is first and foremost, we want to be able to have teachers identified in the system based on their evaluation and based on performance data, not just based on, I self-selected, I got my certificate. Because at this stage of the game, they may or may not have a certificate. In step 2, we would create this kind of opportunity for high potential teachers and MCLs. Y'all heard about that a little bit back in June when we shifted some things, is that we have multi-classroom leaders in some of our middle schools right now, and this is part of the work that Dalila and her team are working on. Where they would actually, and this is interesting, is that once they get identified, is that the vision is to create a system where we're creating our own APs and we're creating our own principals. Not only through a potential incubator framework where we would have high-performing principals having a position on their campuses that we would rotate an AP through or a teacher leader through, but something that we're actually creating our own certification program for, maybe with a higher ed partner. So for example, we have lots of PhDs in the system, Dr. Escobedo, Dr. Fay, Dr. Sarah, Dr. Byram, Dr. Verstuff, where we would create our own certification program with a higher ed institution so that we are truly growing our own. And so in that, as these people are rotated through the campuses and through quality leadership, is that they would have enough experiences and enough learning as an AP that when they step foot into a principalship, that they are actually prepared to be a principal. So it's a very different continuum. It moves from a self-select process to just getting your certification with books and sitting in a classroom to a continuum of experience and experiences that is very well thought out and very well designed, potentially with, and I say that potentially, the dream is to have our own certification program at Southwest ISD so that we are creating our own leaders that will fill those principal seats at some point in our system. In order to do that, and this goes to aligned systems and structures, is that there needs to be a lot of things in place in order to do that. And so the first thing that needed to be in place, which is already done, is this clear definition of what leadership is. And mind you, that took a whole year to do. But some of the other things that are up here with appropriately structured roles, we'll get to that in just a second, robust data systems, individual evaluations, centralized process for identifying talent. Who gets to do that? Incubation campuses. Who will be those campuses? Some of our high-performing campuses. Do we have the high-performing leaders at those campuses? Or is it really about the teachers doing that work? Mentors and experts and facilitators. And then potentially a compensation structure that matches that. And so a lot of these things, we were thinking, man, if it took us a year to do the leadership definition, how are we possibly going to get to this by the 2022? The great news is that we already have most of these pieces in place. It's just about going in and identifying, are they working for us, and revamping some of them, potentially all of them. And I think something that I didn't mention, but I think we're moving to that place, and that's why I brought up the piece about the CLPs being a very competitive process, is actually having a selection process for all of this, so that it's not just about who you know and the relationships that you've built over time, but about your potential to do great work in that position. And so the selection process is going to become a big part of the work of the district moving forward. And so where does all this land on the continuum of our work through the September of 2022? Because while we will graduate in April as a DLP, that's what I've heard, is that the work with Holsworth actually continues for the next 5 years. And Kate had presented a slide where you'll see that we brought on 2 campuses this past year. This next year we will bring on additional campuses. And the goal of Holsworth within the 5 years is to actually have 50% of our campuses go through the process that we're going through, which is the process that Brian and Rosie just got through beginning. And so we plan our work in the next within the next year, 2 years, is having those appropriately structured roles. And so when you look up there, what does an MCL do? What is the real role of an AP? What is the real role of a dean? And what is the real role of the principal? And all of that should be tied back to that leadership definition, to those 3 big themes: the commitment to service, commitment to results, and commitment to growth. Individual evaluations, we already have evaluations. They're based on the T-TEST and T-PEST, but are we certain that those are the instruments that are actually going to produce the evaluation data that we need to actually grow the leadership to put people in the right places? Not so sure. Centralized processes for identifying talent in the system, and that is identifying talent at the very beginning. And so we all know that we have some great teachers in our system that we're going to want to be tapping on the shoulder. Well, who gets to do that, and how do they know that it's there for them to chime into? I had a conversation last night with one of our counselors and asked the question, have you ever considered admin? Why would I do that? And so we need to make that more attractive. Rigorous, transparent selection processes, again, going back to how do people become leaders in the system. And then in the following year, maybe potentially looking at compensation structures. How do they align? Currently, we do have some critical issues that we think that we've looked at. How to make change there is going to be a delicate action. Robust data systems. When we look at the data systems that are in place, we have them all in place. We have we're on data overload most of the time. It's about taking that data and using it for the good of the district. Preparing incubation campuses, and that's a big one. We have probably 3 to 4 campuses right now that I could tell you I could put a VP in, and that VP would grow and learn and thrive. And then we have other campuses where maybe that's not the case, because we have a principal who may not be thriving in that setting. And so creating that structure, it's a very simple tweak to the system. Mentors and experts in facilitation, designing what that actually should look like over time, so that it actually becomes someone's work to actually design that and actually make sure that we execute that plan. And then finally, at the end of it all, we would hope to have created a leadership pipeline that we could over time just continue to reflect on and adapt and make changes to, and just make it better through time. And so on that note, that is the end of the presentation. I want to thank Kate and certainly want to thank Brian and Rosie and Katie for all the work that they have put into helping us keep the work moving forward in the system. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank everybody who's been working on this. I know it's taken a lot of your time.
Questions?
Anybody? Questions?
I just want to add, there's 5 million students in Texas who deserve to have a really great opportunity to live a great quality of life. And if it weren't for entities, we see the other side where people like to point out deficiencies in public education. And if it weren't for an entity like Holdsworth and like Charles Butt and a leader like Kate Rogers, we wouldn't have this opportunity to kind of change what that looks like for the state of Texas. And I think their work is huge, and then there are folks who don't see what things are today, what they can be tomorrow. And it's an honor to be part of that organization, and really excited about the work that's going on in Southwest by so many Southwest people. And it's a point of pride for us to feel that we're part of the evolution of what Holdsworth will be in the future. And so I always want to publicly thank Kate Rogers. I know we always tell her we have a phenomenal board, and I know we're having a conversation in the near future about some of the opportunities that we're going to be working with our board at a different level with this kind of program moving forward. And I look forward to that conversation. But I just want to thank her. She's here in our district. This is President Holdsworth. She takes the time to come up from where she is and spend a few minutes with us, and I think that says volumes about not her own Holdsworth, but the type of person she is and what she thinks about not only our district, but our kids who attend our district. And for us, that's huge. And so thank you for being here and everything you guys do. And Katie, thank you for being here almost every day. And all the people involved. Like Mr. Fraser said, everyone touches this in some way, and our commitment to service, results, and growth is definitely on the forefront, and we will keep evolving that, and it's going to be something to celebrate definitely in the future.
And as a board, we've been together for quite some years, some of us more than others. And Kate, to hear someone like Rosie, who's grown with this district, say what she said was very special today. And we may not have all been on board at the very beginning at the same levels, but I think we are all on board at the top level with you, with our administration, with our team. And we want to thank you for giving us what you've given us.
Dr. First, if I have a comment, even though I wasn't here, and I apologize that I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I had to attend a funeral, as you know. It was my horse's funeral. But at any rate, it wasn't funny. I don't know who. But at any rate, having observed similar processes, although not to this extent, I have to assume that you have considered how you continue this beyond you, meaning most of these processes begin to change as the superintendent changes and comes in and says, oh, I want to do it my way. Or boards come in and say, I want to do it my way. So I know you all thought about that. I just want to reiterate how important that is, because that is where they begin to change and begin to fall and go away.
That's a good point. And I think it all kind of starts from what do we have in common? And that's the next generation of adults that we're preparing for the future. I think from that denominator, we move forward. And that means building capacities and strategies and opportunities. But one of the things that I know we had the conversation, Mr. Frater was part of it with Kate in the beginning, is that we built a 65-year history of Southwest on relationships, and that's great, but that may not carry us into the future. And so we need to have structures and processes and other opportunities for folks to onboard, to offboard, to be part part of the system on a different level, and that's huge, and it happens over time. I can tell you the leadership definition, I wanted to do it in 5 minutes, take HEBs and just replace the wording, and it wouldn't have been the same thing as what we came up with, because the words are meaningful and powerful, and they are Southwest, and so taking our time and being very methodical and spending the time on this, I think is critical to where we end up in the future. Good point.
Any other comments?
Katie, you want to say anything, or Ms. Kate? Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. We need to move right along and go to item 3 on your agenda, and approval of UT Gear Up.
Yes, Ms. Vandercook's gonna go through.
Melissa Vandercook, as you guys know, is our advanced academic, and is working with this pretty phenomenal program that started with our 7th graders last year, and will rise with that cohort group of students for multiple years towards the end of getting more kids in college and through college.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President, board members, Dr. Verstev. So I'm here to request your approval for the year 2 of the interlocal agreement for Gear Up. The total cash award that we're receiving over the 7 years is approximately $3 million. This monetary amount doesn't include the technology we've already received, for example, in TI Inspires that we've gotten above and beyond, as well as teacher professional development. They're not right now, we're going through trainers to grow some capacity as our Gear Up grant moves forward. We're leaving something on the middle school so that they can continue this work that's already been started. Our campuses also receive monthly support and coaching from UT. And so that's not part of that $3 million, and I think that's an important concept because all that starts to add up and it starts to build us as our capacity within our system. It is a match grant. Our match is approximately $4 million over the 7 years total. We got a late start and we're already over, for this first year, we're well over $500,000, and that was with a late start, and we still have another month to go to continue that match. So I'm here to request your approval of the interlocal agreement with UT for our Gear Up for year 2.
Questions?
And when you say match, we're looking for partners to provide the match, but yet if need be, we will provide funding. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's really things that we're already doing. So for example, me here today presenting this, I get to include my salary, everybody else's salary, talking about Gear Up that was paid. So it's things that we're already kind of doing, as well as donations from our community. When they donate things to us for our specific students, we can include that time as a match as well. So it's both salaries, it's goods and services, it's volunteerism. So all those things count towards that match.
They have a pretty good program to help us find matching, that stuff that we're already doing, so we don't have to add, buy stuff to make sure we match it.
Yeah, so for example, they have, with TSI Prep, they have found us a vendor that will actually give us 200% of anything we order. So if we order $10,000, they're going to give us a donation of another $20,000. So that donation, then we can pile into this match that we're required to meet as part of the grant.
There's a ton of paperwork.
It is a ton of paperwork.
To give you an example, we hire 4 full-time positions through this grant, so there's a return on that. That's
Yeah.
time and paperwork.
Any other questions? Need a motion?
I so move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
ma'am. Moving right along to RFP of graphic design services.
Yes, sir. This is a RFP that, as we move forward, and as we're trying to market our district, I feel like it's important. I don't know if many of you've seen, like we've gone into stadiums and they have logos on the stadiums and banners up. So there's a graphic design company called Waterboy Graphics who we're looking to award because we're looking to actually go out and market some of our campuses, and we're going to strategically do it. Here in the next couple of weeks, you'll see at Legacy. You're going to see a bunch of logos up, some verbiage on walls, just to start building some identities at certain campuses. So this is kind of a plan that we want to do over time. But we have to meet the procurement law, so we did an RFP. We solicited vendors, and we're asking the board to approve Waterboy Graphics as the awarded vendor for this project. And we have one extend 1-year contract, and we'll see how they do. And if we feel like we're doing well for the district, we'd like to renew it when that time comes. And if not, we'll probably release another RFP. So this is just for internal projects that we can do to spice up some of our campuses and different places across the district.
And this company's winning the pool.
This will be our vendor that we're going to use for for those projects. It's like buying like Fatheads. I don't know if you've ever seen Fatheads of football players, and we can do that with logos and put those all over the place in all the different districts, all over the district. Fatheads.
Can we get a fat head of Mr. Frazier?
We can, if they can absolutely do it, and put it right on that wall right there.
I move.
I hear a second.
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Moving on to items of information, accountability on CCMR and Domain 3.
We have Lisa Volz here, Executive Director of Accountability, and as we still continue moving through the many changing targets that our new accountability system has brought upon our district and our campuses, Lisa Volz is here to just give us some item information on CCMR and Domain 3, which is very robust, and it has around 72 targets that we have to be accountable for.
There are like 72 documents behind the one page of accountability. I think Lisa's going to cover probably 2 of the 72. And our goal is to just bring this over time and continue talking about accountability. So it's really great to learn. I don't know if you feel that way after we're done, but I think we have to go.
Okay, good afternoon. Last time I came and talked about accountability, I told you I probably would need to come again. So just to review briefly, we have 3 domains. Domain 1 is on student achievement, so that's looking at just STAR at approaches, meets, and masters, averaging those together for all campuses. At the district and high schools, that's 40% of the grade for this domain. High schools and districts also have CCMR, College Career Military Readiness, which is 40% of the overall, and then graduation rate, which is 20%. Domain 2 has 2 parts. Part A, which is looking at academic growth. Did the student stay at the same level of performance or higher? And did they meet at least a year's worth of growth? And that gives us our points for Part A. And Part B is relative performance, our STAR performance compared to other schools that are at the same amount of economically disadvantaged students, and that gives us our score for Domain 2, Part B. And the better of those is our overall score for Domain 2, Part B. What we're going to focus on today is Domain 3, which is closing the gaps. This is the piece that is our ESSA compliance. So there are a lot of parts to this to make sure that we meet the waiver for the federal government. So no matter what campus type you are or district, you have the same 4 areas, but what's counted is a little bit different depending on if you're a high school or district. So the first area is academic achievement. It's the same for every level. So we're looking at the percent of students that meets or higher in reading, and then the percent of students meets or higher in math. For a high school or district, that is half of your overall score for Domain 3. The second piece is different depending on what level you're at. For elementary and middle schools, the second piece is STAR growth, separated by math and reading. For high schools and districts, it's graduation rate, and they're using the 4-year federal rate for this piece. For high schools and districts, graduation rate is 10% of the overall score. The third piece is the same at all levels. It's English language learner proficiency level. So this is looking at TELPAS, where students able to grow from one year to the next. There's only one indicator for that, and it is 10% of the overall score. And the last one is school quality, student success. At elementary and middle school, they're looking at STAR scores, all of the different types of tests, subjects, grade levels to put together. For high schools and districts, this is where we look at CCMR, College and Career Military Readiness. And that is 30% of the overall score for a high school or a district. So now with these 4 pieces, with the exception of the EL progress measure, we're going to break them out into 14 groups. All of our different ethnics and races, and then also all students. EcoDisc, Special Ed Current, that's the students that are currently being served by the Special Ed program. Special Ed Former, which is a new area. So we're looking at students who have been exited from Special Ed in the last 3 years and how they're performing on STAR or CCMR or graduation. And then we have EL plus Former, and we're going to go 4 years after they've exited the program. We've always gone 2 years, but they've expanded that to 4 years after they've been out of the program and see how they are performing in all these areas. So that's changed slightly. And 2 brand new groups, continuously enrolled and non-continuously enrolled. To be continuously enrolled, you have to be enrolled in the district on snapshot day and also in the district on snapshot day the past 4 years to be considered continuously enrolled. If you haven't been there, then you're considered non-continuously enrolled. So they're looking at how we're performing with both of these groups also. So this is what the chart looks like. And all of those numbers are targets. So you have different targets for each area and each of the broken out pieces. So reading and math for academic achievement is broken out separately. Academic growth is broken out separately as reading and math. You have EL progress, and then you have the school quality broken out. What's important to note is the target is different for each one of these cells. For example, for reading, for academic achievement, we needed 44% of all of our students to be at the meets or higher level to meet the target. But for math, it's 46. For academic growth, it's a different target. For reading, we needed 66% of our students to have growth in reading, and we needed 71% of our students to have growth in math. Every single cell has a different target. The percentages, again, academic achievement, 30%, growth 50%, EL progress 10%, and school quality 10% for elementaries and middle schools. For high school, academic achievements 50%, graduation rates 10%, EL progress is 10%, and CCMR is 30%. Everyone has the data for participation, but it is not calculated into your score for this domain. So where do we get these numbers? So we go to our data tables, and I'll give you an example of how it looks. So we actually can get the data tables from domain 1 for our academic achievement and look at our percent at meets or higher. So if our performance was at 52 for all students, we would have met that goal. So on our data table for domain 3, we would have a yes. We'd have the target and a yes because we met it. Then we'd look at the next group, African Americans, and see if we met that target. If we did not, we would have an N. And then we look at the next group and the next group and so on all the way down the road for reading. And then we repeat the process for math. And so you have a table of yeses and nos, whether you met the target or did not meet the target for each of the 14 groups. School quality, which is college career readiness measure for high schools and district, it's the same thing. We look at our percentage of students, all students, and see if we met the target for domain 1, for all, for each of our different 14 groups. So college and career readiness, military readiness, there are 8 indicators that are used to determine this number. A student could have gotten a 3 on an AP test at some point in their career, and they would earn us a point. A student could have met the TSI criteria in math and reading, and they can use that through a variety of different assessments. Whatever combination will get us the point, they will accept. So ASAT, ACT, TSIA, Or if they didn't meet it on one of those exams, they could have taken a college prep course. And they have to meet the TSI criteria in both reading and math to give us a point toward college and career military readiness. A student could have taken dual credit, 3 hours of ELAR, or 3 hours of math, or 9 hours of any combination of subjects. The student could have earned an associate's degree. The student could have earned an industry-based certification. There are only 73 certifications that count in the CCMR accountability. Although there are many certifications out there, they only use the 73 that have been identified by the commissioner. A student could have completed their IEP and shown that they are workforce readiness. They have that qualification, and so they have a graduation code of 04, 05, or 54 or 55. A student could have enlisted in the U.S. Armed Forces. Any of those will get us a point for that student. If a student doesn't have any of those 7, then TA will look at, are they in a CTE coherent sequence of courses? So as a senior, they're coded as a 2 because they're still in a cohesive sequence of courses, and one of those courses matches up to one of those 73 certifications. We get a half point for that student if that student has no other indicator. So when we get the data for our students, student could have every single area, they've met every single area, but they're still only going to give us 1 point. A student could have only met one area, and they still give us 1 point. Doesn't matter how many you meet, as long as you meet at least one, you'll give us a full point. If the student only has the last criteria, the CTE, then we get a half point for that student. So we're looking at the percentage for all of those different 14 groups, how many of our students have given us a point, then they are college, career, military ready. So count up how many you have of these different cells you have numbers for, how many of them were yeses, and do the math to figure out the percentage, and then you have to weight them. So academic achievement is 30%, star growth is 50%, English language proficiency, there's only one indicator, it's 10%, and then student achievement, CCMR, is 10%. And that gives you a score. So part 1 or part 2, whichever is better, is 70% of your overall. And part 3, domain 3, is 30% of your overall for a final rating. Districts had an A through F rating this year. Campuses had an improvement required or a MET standard rating this year. So what are some possible ramifications? Looking at just domain 3, there are campuses that are in what is called comprehensive support and improvement. So these are the lowest 5% of campuses across the state in domain 3. We do have 2 campuses that are comprehensive support. Legacy and McNair are comprehensive support campuses, and they are working on a targeted improvement plan, and we'll be bringing that to you later at another meeting. You could be an additional targeted support label. That's based on the percent of indicators for campuses based on the comprehensive support schools. So whatever percentage of indicators the comprehensive support schools met, that was the target for everyone else to have met for each of those different groups. And if you had one group that did not meet the target, then you are an additional targeted support campus. Those campuses are also working on targeted improvement plans. We have several of those. Scobie, Southwest High School, Spicewood are all additional targeted support campuses. Then looking at the overall for school improvement, any district that had an overall score of F is in school improvement, and any school that has an overall score of improvement required is a school improvement campus, and they are also working on a TIP. We do have one school improvement campus, and that is McCullough. Coming next year, we'll also have another label and the possibility of campuses being classified as a targeted support campus. And those are campuses that have student groups that have not met the target in Domain 3 for 3 consecutive years. Questions?
Do we know what targeted support will mean to us as of yet?
The ATAC is meeting this month, and they'll be giving recommendations to the commissioner for what that will mean, because they haven't really fleshed out exactly what that looks like at this point. So we're waiting to find out.
Lisa, can you explain to the board why Spicewood Park, that's an example, they are on targeted support.
Additional targeted support.
Student group. So using that example may give everyone kind of an idea of how that kind of evolved.
So Spicewood Park met the target for each of the groups that they had numbers in, except for white students. Their white students did not have enough students to count in academics, in growth, obviously not in ELs because there's only one indicator. But when you combine all tests together, math, reading, writing, science, together, they had enough tests to make a group. And so they had one indicator for white students. They had 11 students. They didn't meet the target. Not enough of those tests were at meets or higher. And so they are an additional targeted support campus.
So no matter what their ethnicity is, this is a small group of students who trigger a target improvement. And so they're important.
They're important.
We have to do good, we have to do better, I get that. But just to give you an idea of how specific the accountability system is and what triggers different types of support or what we have to do. And so I think, our work is cut out for us because every student counts and we're counting every student. And, we know we have to do some improvement at the middle school. That's kind of our albatross right now. We've had that conversation and what that looks like and what we come to understand how we can support changing their trajectory is going to be huge in our district. And if I had to say there's one area that needs our focus the most right now, it's definitely at the middle school years. Going especially from 5th to 6th, we see a huge slide in students' performance levels at that transition period. You see it in the state. Ours looks deeper and faster than what the state slide looks like.
Anybody else?
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
So we have targeted improvement plans for those schools?
Yes, we're working, we have a, what is it called, a TAP? Not TAP, that's the old term. but-
It's their targeted improvement plan, a TIP, for each of the comprehensive improvement required and additional targeted support campus. They all are writing TIPs.
We're working with a TEA liaison, basically, to kind of work with the campus and work through Lisa, and we meet. And there's a task force that meets in our district that identifies the root cause analysis of why we think this is why it is and what we're going to do about it as a district. And there'll be some benefit that comes from getting into that work from winning on. Don't like how we can do that work without being comprehensive improvement or target improvement, but we are where we are today, but it doesn't mean that's where we have to be next time around. We have to do a better job, and it kind of goes back to that whole leadership. It's contingent on leadership that we have at my level and central office level and campus level, in the classroom level. How do we do a better job? But we can't. We're doing some really great things, and we're pushing rigor into the middle schools. But at the end of the day, Joe Public only sees our data. That's how they make perceptions, and you just have to make sure our data is worthy being looked at and creating a perception for people. And I would say at this point it's not. And it's not specifically at specific levels. It is really pretty phenomenal when you look at elementary, specifically elementary math. And we want to provide the presentation that we presented in Utah to Imagine Math. I think it tells a really great story about Southwest ISD and about what happens collectively at our 11 elementaries, specifically in math, and what that journey, 5-year journey, looks like on paper, because I think that's a great story. Now we need to take that story and kind of expand it out. We do everybody's story, not just elementary.
Anybody else? Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Bolte?
All right, moving on down to our last item, comprehensive literacy instruction.
So last year, we had a committee who came together, and this is just the different departments that put together a literacy committee, and then along with this were literacy initiatives. So some of the work was spearheaded, and it belonged in first grade. We started with first grade. So now that work is really expanding, and we're seeing some great results.
Good afternoon, Mr. Board President, board members, Dr. Verstev, Dr. Fay, Dalila. I am going to switch over to my account because someone closed out our
If he has a closed session.
presentations. Right, that's not it. And so I'm going to begin with a brief introduction as to what we have been doing so far with our literacy update. About 2 years ago, we began this work and we started putting together a CNI plan for a district-wide leadership plan as to how we were going to be addressing, as Dr. Verstev said, some of the gaps that we were experiencing at secondary and especially at middle school, and then so how also we were going to increase that rigor and ensure that students are moving up grade levels and ensure that they're reading by the time that they leave, not first grade, but at least second grade, well into third grade. So we began this work and we started putting the committees together and a task force together, and we started really identifying where we're going to be our focuses. So last year, we decided that around literacy, we were going to focus around small group instruction, writing calibrations, and 3 parts of the TEAC. And so because we've learned, as Dr. Verstev mentioned with Holdsworth, we kind of pull back the reins a little bit, and we want to make sure that when we start something, we develop it really well before we really start to roll it out and push it out so that everybody has a thorough understanding of what we're doing and where we're going. And so we, this year, are continuing with those same 3 focuses, and we are adding some smaller pieces, but that are all connected to these same things. So it's not like we're adding something on or we're giving campuses or teachers or students something in addition to that. And so we started with the small group instruction, and basically what that is, and you see the number that's identified right there next to it, is for grade 1. We started that with a grade 1, but as soon as the other grade levels started to hear about this, they also started to implement some of these practices. The administrators started sharing it with some of the other grade levels, and then so did the academic coaches. And so everybody was trying to learn and wanting to get on board with what is the small group instruction and how can we get this training. And so the administrators were trained as well. We focused a lot on the why it was important for our students to receive small group instruction as opposed to whole group instruction all day long, where the teacher is doing the majority of the talking. It should actually be flipped, where students are doing 80% of the talking, teachers actually doing 20%, and then really focusing on their differentiated needs in those small groups. And so it is based on current brain research. The teachers understand the importance of implementing the use of small groups for teaching concepts and skills requiring deep understanding, again, going back to the deep rigor that Dr. Verstev mentioned. For first grade, we also focused on writing instructional practices. We know that when students get to 4th grade, a big focus for that teacher is the writing instruction, and we have to make sure that that's scaffolded and that students are exposed to writing as part of literacy as well, and that oracy that they're developing early in the grades, early as kinder, first grade, and in just a few minutes you'll get Ms. Vicky Mata and Mr. Bill Avey will be able to share some of that information with you. So this specific writing instructional practices PD was developed for Southwest ISD to cover the components of the writer's workshop, planning effective mini lessons, how to conference with students as they're editing their pieces, they're revising, and then as they're publishing the work. The big one is the 3 parts of the TEAC, because we did provide that for all teachers, all administrators, all grade levels, and so that is where that rigor comes in. We have to ensure that our teachers know what they're teaching, and when we look at those TEACs, the English Language Arts TEACs are about to change for the following year.
And so they're very comprehensive, very extensive. And so we need to make sure that teachers really understand what is it that I'm supposed to teach, what are the behaviors and skills that the students are supposed to know, and then what are they supposed to be able to do by the time I finish teaching this TEK. So the difference between teaching and learning, right? So I'll show you in just a minute. The part 1 of the TEK, it has 3 parts of it. One of them is the strand, the second one is a knowledge statement, and the third one is the student expectation. So this is pretty much how it is, right? You have your knowledge and your skills. Then your concepts and facts are directly related to, connected to the knowledge. The behaviors and procedures of what the students are supposed to do is directly connected to the skills after they have been exposed to and learned that TEK. But if we provide just the knowledge without building those skills for them is where that leads to their confusion and where they're not able to master those TEKs sometimes. And so before I transfer it over to Ms. Vicky Mata and Mr. Bill Avey, this is some of the work that has already started. We started going out to the campuses during the 3rd and 4th week of schools, and we started following up with this work. We started this work last year, so as we walked the halls with the administrators, the coaches, and even some teachers, where are we with the 3 parts of the TEK? We're starting out the new year. We gave them a few weeks to get going. And so how are we continuing this work? Because it's not just going away. And so they right away started showing us, this is all the writing that they've done. We have right over here, this is a kinder writing. We have 1st grade, 2nd grade, all the way up to 4th grade, where they're breaking down those 3 parts of the TEK. They're showing us their evidence of learning, and then it's moving along right with the scope and sequence and those year at a glance where they should be. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, who's next? Is it you? And I'll still be available if you have any questions.
Good afternoon. So I'm going to go into, actually, it was, but you want to just, okay. We'll go into the writing initiatives that started last year. So Velia just spoke to one of the 3 that we pushed out to elementary was writing. Last year we started with 1st grade, and at the beginning of the year there were some growing pains. There was a lot of training that needed to happen. Teachers needed resources, and so those are the things that we did and we rolled out all last year. And so 1st grade was the focus last year. So this year we're following that group of kids and going to 2nd grade and training 2nd grade teachers. But what's really awesome right now is that, like Velia mentioned, even though we were focusing on specific grade levels, campuses and teachers were seeing it and saying, no, we want to do it. So they were taking ownership at the campus level. A big one was Bob Hope, Mr. Penarts and his team, and we'll see, I have some samples for you guys to see. And so, oh yes. And so what we did last year was we collected them, teachers got the student samples, put them in an envelope, ponied them to us, and so we had the physical samples. This year, we made some changes and updated to everything's digital now. And the beauty of this is that we can track a student's writing development and their progress, not just at the central office level, but at a campus level. That's where the power is at, the campus leader and the teacher. And so if we look at, hold on, that's 2nd grade. So you can tell just by looking that there's some need here. That doesn't mean that students aren't going to get there, but this is just a great visual of where the kids are at, what teacher. So if we look through each teacher, so you can see some differences there. And so what happens is they score on that 1st score. The 2nd score, there's a few people involved in that. That's central office, academic coach, and the assistant principal, just like last year. So what you guys are looking at are 1st grade samples. This is the beginning of the year. This is amazing for a 1st grader to be able to write like this. So you can tell just by looking at those 1st grade samples, some great quality, effective instructional practices are happening. Then when you move to 2nd grade, the same thing. And the 2nd grade samples that you're looking at all came from one teacher. So that just shows how powerful, if the teacher's taking ownership and pushing this through in their classroom, the results that can happen. And this is just at the beginning of the year.
It's really great to see this. I have a grandson that just graduated from A&M and he can't write. He couldn't do this good. You can't read it.
Yeah. Which,
It's from Medina Valley. They don't teach how to write over there, period. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You went to UT, I thought.
No, I had another one that went to UT. That one could write. But he went to Southwest, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm getting,
That's okay. So if you look, and I apologize for the copy, it came out really dark. The very last page, I thought this was impressive and phenomenal. This is a 4th grade classroom. I took a picture of just a piece of it, but that actually is the way the entire grade level at Bob Hope looked. We weren't monitoring upper grades last year at the district level, but this campus said, we're going to do it for all grade levels. If 1st grade can do it, we can all do it. And so this is a reflection of quality instruction in 3rd grade, and now this is what they're producing in 4th grade. And we know our 4th grade writing scores are not where we want them to be, but it's not just about star writing. It's lifelong. These kids are going to have to write college application essays, the AP exam, right, Melissa, AP exam, right? So this is just what we're doing, our part at the elementary level to make sure we're sending kids to middle school ready. Any questions? Okay. I'll go back to her slide. Oh, Bill.
I just want to say one thing about you said there was growing pains in I was one of those growing pains because my sister has a little girl who's at Sun Valley, and she would come home crying because she had to write so much. So I called Lloyd, and then I talked to Bonnie. Had I known you and Bonnie were behind the initiative, I would have just told my sister, that's okay, it's going to work out. I didn't know. I didn't know who was behind it, right? So, but I tell you what, she is reading like a rock star this year. And I really think a lot of it had to do with all that writing, and she's able to put little sentences together, and she's just doing really well. So thank you for sticking to it and not listening to the board member who was complaining.
Good afternoon. And Mr. Frazier, you're right. Students do often get through college and have a hard time writing. So at the secondary level this year, we're kind of mimicking what they did with the 1st graders last year at 6th and 8th grade. We're doing weekly writing collections, and just like the 1st graders the campuses went through with the 1st grade collections, we're in the growing pain stages with this. But these 6th and 8th grade writing collections are designed really for multiple things. The actual assignments that they're turning into us on a weekly basis are constructed responses that are really intended to increase reading comprehension. On the rubric, we have added an extra column where we're asking teachers to go in and now evaluate the actual mechanics of the writing. And so we want to go from micro to macro with this process by virtue of having to look basically at a paragraph. We're having our teachers go down and look all the way to the word level of the student's writing, and then to the sentence level of the student's writing. And then we will progress with what we're finding is a lot of simple sentences right now. And our teachers are being trained on how to teach the students how to turn those simple sentences into compound sentences and complex sentences. And so that'll help with internal coherence in writing, which is sentence to sentence within the paragraph. At the same time, we have built into our scope and sequence, we have all the required process papers, the compositions that the state says that we're required to teach. Procedural text, expository text, persuasive text, personal narrative, imaginative story. So when they're studying a genre, they have to mimic that style with their own writing, which makes the writing much more authentic. Sometimes, especially at 7th grade in English 1 and English 2, there seems to be a real emphasis on doing assessment writing. Here's your prompt, here's your 26 lines, go write it the way you're going to have to do it on the test. We have in the scope and sequence 3 separate times where we shut down and we have the students practice exactly the way that they're going to do it on the test, but the way to develop writers is through more authentic writing. So these pictures up here are from walkthroughs that I've done this year. And you would look at the bell ringer's kind of hard to read, but it's a writing assignment. These are two new strategies that we're really implementing with reading and writing and making a reading-writing connection this year. These pictures were taken not in 7th grade classrooms, which is where you would expect to see them mostly. The one on the left is a 6th grade classroom, and that's an 8th grade classroom with that bell ringer writing exercise. So the 6th and 8th grade collections are going to help improve students' reading comprehension and their writing simultaneously, which is what reading and writing is supposed to do in the first place. It works together. And it will also create a much more vertically aligned system and a tighter curriculum where these teachers know that if it says you're teaching a writing standard next week, we expect to see the evidence of that with our collections and with our as the second bullet, weekly planning with 7th grade English 1 and English 2 teachers with job-embedded professional development. So what I'm doing with that is I'm getting a week ahead of scope and sequence. So when I meet with my teachers this week, we're going to look at what they're teaching next week, and do you really know how to teach that? Do you really know how to teach that? Educators come out of college and they are very well versed in literature. English teachers are very well versed often in teaching reading, but not necessarily in teaching writing. So we're getting a week ahead of the scope and sequence. In fact, when I leave here, I'm going to Legacy for English 2 and English 1. We're going to look at what they're doing next week. Do you really know how to do this? And if they really don't, before I leave, they will. So we're really excited about the ability to do that. Professional development, we've already had a couple of pull-out PDs with our 7th grade teachers, as well as our English 1 and English 2 teachers. There's a picture from one of the activities with our two of our five brand new English 2 teachers to the district. And Dr. McAndrew and I have had some conversation around those 5 brand new English 2 teachers between our 2 high school campuses are very important teachers to our system. If Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, 100% of progress measure, domain 2A, am I saying this right? Is going to basically fall on the English 2 team at the high schools. At the high schools. So we are really, those English 2 teachers and myself have become very good friends. I'll just put it that way. So we have 3 other professional developments scheduled throughout the year. And then what's not going to be covered with the pull-out PDs, I'll be covering on a weekly basis with the teachers when I meet with them. So the first professional development we had was just writing process. Our composition scores over the last 5 years are moving nowhere. They're flatlining and they're not good enough. So we have to make sure that our teachers understand the writing process and how to teach each phase of it. Also, on a positive note, we have now added 5 new Abydos trainers to the district. We had one currently. We had 5 people that went to Spring Branch. Thank you, Dalila. We had the opportunity to send some people down there for certification, and we sent them. And so we had 5 people that passed their certification lessons. Vicki left. Vicki Mato was one. And we are scheduling with the Abydos Literacy Learning to get the other 5 people in the cohort certified. We're shooting for before Christmas break. Okay? Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So sorry, we're a little out of order. Good afternoon. I just want to share some additional information around our literacy plan. So as we are looking at the needs of the teachers and some of our specific literacy initiatives, we also realize that we need to continue developing content knowledge and expertise in reading to our teachers. And we're starting out in the lower grades in K through 2nd. And so we have some really great programs for our students, namely Saxon Phonics and Spelling. We know that that has helped our students become better readers and build foundational skills. And our writing efforts are even helping students improve writing and reading at the same time. But not all of our teachers really understand the science behind how do we teach students to read. And so programs alone won't get us the results that we need. So we have to continue providing professional development to our teachers so that they become experts in reading. And I would probably argue that one of the biggest factors that is going to predict student success is the classroom teacher and then our principals. So with this additional push towards literacy, we've addressed both of those. We created a 38-member cohort that has at least 3 participants from each campus, teachers, interventionists, academic coaches. We have a special education inclusion teacher plus 3 leaders from CNI that are getting training in literacy and acquisition of reading and how to support students is using those best evidence-based practices. Plus, we're providing a series for our principals. How do we develop systems at the campus level specifically for literacy? What does that look like, and what do they need to do to get the results that we need? So this project has just begun. So we began the training in September, and we're going to be continuing that training throughout this year with the hope of redelivering that information and PLCs to our K through 2nd teachers. Do you guys have any questions?
Anybody? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank all of you for being here and covering what you were going to cover today. Do you have anything else?
I do. Yeah, I think that there's a really great focus on literacy as far as last year and the year before that. I think we're going to see some good dividends come from. I want to bring something up while we're on the main topic of construction, and I have recently one more thing for you guys, so I can look this up. I want to leave on a really positive note. I think what we heard in literacy is pretty phenomenal. I want to show you, since we're having this conversation, what we covered in Utah, just 2 slides, and it won't take 5 minutes, but while I pull it up, Richard will kind of share one more things with you, please.
So this weekend on last Saturday, we had both of our bands go to marching contest. It's one of the earliest contests of the contest season. So the Legacy Band went to Cotulla High School and performed there, and Southwest Band went to East Central High School and performed at that invitational. They had a lightning delay there at East Central, and so everything was kind of pushed back and so forth. But Southwest came back with earning 2nd place out of 10 5A bands that were in competition there. So congrats to them.
Good.
And then, yeah, they did a great job. And then Legacy, only in their 2nd year, went to the Gazebo contest, and they swept all the caption awards: best ranger, best brass, best woodwinds, best percussion, and best drum majors, I believe, and also took the 1st place trophy for the 5A group. So, real proud of those groups. Very nice job. And just wanted to remind everybody that this Saturday is the 40th anniversary of Johnson London Medina. And that contest is happening this Saturday. Legacy will be performing at 11:15, and Southwest will be performing.
Are you going to your Google?
Where?
They already cleaned it up? Bring you both.
This is Lisa's presentation.
So we're still working at it, but it's
She signed out.
that's the plan for it to be there.
Legacy's at 11?
15.
11, and when is the?
2:45 for Southwest.
Wait, I think you passed yourself up. No, keep, scroll down, but slow.
Great. Dr. B, did you want me to share some of the other?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, and then the junior dance clinic that Southwest High School is putting on this week is also happening on Saturday. That will happen at the Southwest High School gym at 10 a.m. And that's where all the little ones come and
What age is that
with
for?
the older students.
What age is that?
You know, I'm not sure the ages, but I think as young as 5 years old. Yeah.
And what time is that?
It starts at 10 a.m. at the Southwest High School gym.
And they register there?
They can, yes.
Okay.
And, of course, this week also we have, the one football game because it's a bye week for Southwest High School. But Legacy High School will be traveling to Laredo.
Is this the one you want? Go there?
To compete there at 7:30, and that is at Shirley Field.
So you're there.
I'm gonna change that. I don't wanna go in here.
The game will be at the Shirley Field at 7:30
Drive.
on Friday
Where's slides?
for Legacy versus Laredo Mark. And Southwest.
Did you recently have it open?
Is there a charge for that
So it
clinic?
might be under recent. Is it any of these?
There was,
What are we saying?
unclear as to what that is, but I can find out for you. Yes, sir.
I was just going to thank you and Southwest for performing at the tricentennial celebration in Somerset on Saturday, and Dr. Verstiff is going to speak. But thank you. It's Southwest Choir is going to sing for the celebration.
10 a.m., sorry, at 10 a.m., yes.
Huh?
At 10 a.m. on Saturday, and they will be there at the Somerset Bicentennial,
Yes. This is tricentennial.
Tricentennial, sorry.
He said to keep talking, killing time for
Well, I
him.
have an announcement.
Oh,
We're having
no.
a bond election, November 6th.
Talk about that for him.
Yeah. And so, we're gonna have a growth and planning meeting on Wednesday. We've gone out to almost every open house.
Is it Wednesday or
This is
Thursday?
Wednesday
Signed
night
out. He
at
just
6.
signed on.
I'm gonna bring in a group, kind of talk about strategically how we can get out and support.
Too many people, too many people.
So that'll be on Wednesday. We'll have a timeline of different items that need to happen up to the bond election. But November 22nd is the early voting. That's gonna run through October 2nd. Not November 2nd, sorry.
Not that I
And
know.
on November 6th.
He had already logged on.
Election. Yes,
Is
sir.
that gonna be only here at central office?
It'll be, well, we'll have central office, the early voting will be here, but all the Bear County sites will have early voting. But for us, it'll be here, just like our normal board election, and then we'll have our sites for, on board, on election day. And so we'll just need to,
So early voting is like at the library and here.
correct.
Do we have a committee that's doing the signs?
We have a growth and planning committee, but also, we have, that's part of the meeting we're having on Wednesday, to create a group. We're gonna have some outside, helpers. We now know that like Carr and some people are interested in helping us kind of form a, not really a pack, but a group that can get together and,
Do you know the name of it?
Imagine math.
Can we ask Dan Latrell to help too?
Hang on right there, I think.
we could.
Bond,
He's unfortunate.
Well, I mean, he's not with Fluger, but we haven't chosen people yet, have we?
Well, we actually have our architects in a contract for like 6 years. And so he'd have to be on our next, so he's working to get on our next, bid. Because currently, right now, even if we did try to bid on us, he doesn't have the, based on our specifications, his firm in San Antonio would not be qualified. So they're working on
Is it a
that.
presentation?
Because he only
The
has like
yellow
2
one.
or 3 people.
What
They
y'all
have to add
talking
themselves
about?
to the list, you mean, right?
Correct. He'll be added to the list, but he'll have to,
Committee that finds
Okay.
us, I mean.
How do you do a slide? I mean,
To present.
but, I mean, we can, I mean, there's plenty of people. I was just at the golf tournament. They're ready to help,
Okay,
whatever we need.
all right,
And so I'm gonna meet with Mr. Umack, talk to him about it.
okay.
The question came up, do we have money to fix the press box at Southwest?
We're
Do
gonna
we have
that
money?
out of fund balance.
Yeah.
It's not actually in the bond, but we have money in, if we wanted.
Hadn't we talked about doing that?
Yes.
Correct.
well, that would have to be a fund balance
Are we in the process of
item.
doing anything?
Yeah, because right now we have natatorium, GMACs, tracks, so we might wanna put that like at a fund balance.
Is it on a wish
Start to
list?
get to, that's on the wish list.
Is
yes.
it? It is,
Yes.
okay.
But if we wanna, like, when we do the Southwest High School renovation, and we wanna do it part of the package, we may come back with like, as a fund balance to do that certain
I
section.
know we've talked about it,
Yeah.
and there's not any comparison. We might want to put a little paint there or something, you know?
Yeah.
Well, is there any way we can get that on a timeline so it's ready for next football season?
For next football season, we can actually do that outside of the bond.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
Okay, let's do that,
Okay.
and then we can start, that's a project we can do, if we're gonna do it at fund balance, we can do without being apart.
Right,
It's just cost of values if we do it together, because we have the
Right.
contractor there, but if we do separate projects,
Yeah.
we can see.
okay.
Early election is October 22nd through November the 2nd, and voting date is November the 6th. And so we have divvied up through all the open houses, and we've been to the Booster Club organizations to present the bond presentation, and we'll present it here at the regular board meeting. What we're at right now is doing a U.S. postal mail out here in the next week or two to make sure that everyone gets the information, the facts about the bond in their home. And I know at the Growth and Planning, we meet with MAC and company tomorrow to see if they want to do anything about creating a small pack or pack. That'll be up to them. All we can do is provide the facts about the dates and the plan of what the bond consists of.
At this time, what is the amount?
$75 million.
I also had a community member ask me if they would be able to use the schools for meetings about the annexation, or if maybe they could piggyback it on, like, because of the big city annexation that's coming to Big Country and over there by Ladd Road and Shepherd Road, all that, for information. Because they think I mean, really, the community doesn't know much about the annexation, and it's coming, so.
Correct. Yeah, we've had like something like that, like TxDOT will use set up meetings, the city, this depends if the city wants to do that. Now, you're talking about an individual, like just a community member that wants to
I
hold a
think
session?
the ESD wants to do it, Herschel.
We direct them all through the facility use request online, and that just
No,
kind of.
but they were kind of wanting to piggyback it on something where people were already coming to. You know how we do the PTAs and
Like the Growth and Planning, we would have a
something like that.
representative group
Just-
of
Or
folks
maybe
there.
they can just come give information about it or whatever.
They can piggyback off of one of our meetings, they just have to contact
You or
Brandon or myself,
Brandon?
either one,
Okay.
and we'll make it work for them.
All right.
So I wanted to share this with you guys, because I think this is what I hear in what's happening in literacy, and already started in that trajectory. And I agree, it should be about scores, but we need to look at data to see what data looks like over time. And so for this presentation, I just want to share these two slides with you guys. We went into the TAPER report, that's on TEA, it's public information, extrapolated third, fourth, and fifth grade math in the districts that you see represented here. And what did that look like as far as how did we rank amongst those districts in 2012-13? And how does that compare with the state average? You know, where's the state rank in Bexar County ISDs? And this is a story, and it's a story we were able to share in Utah, but it's a story about what I'm hearing that's happening in literacy as well. And this is a story we're taking out to our middle schools to say, look, this is our elementary. This is their 4-year journey minus the 14-15 school year. That's when the math teaks change, and they were a level of rigor, so they gave everyone in Texas a pass. So if you're wondering why that 14-15 school year is not there, that's why it's not there. But you can see where our rank was in 2012 and 13. You can see how that changed the next year with this focus on math. And again, this is all of elementary tested grades, 3, 4, 5 in math. And you can see how that changed over time from 12, 13 to 13, 14 to 15, 16. And then the final year that we had the data last year is where we rank. And so you basically went from almost last ranking when you take those scores and this public information and you average them together and come up with the average. That's what it changed. And so then we said, well, let's share that picture amongst a school district that we want to compare with, that we had not been able to compare with. And this is just the growth. So if you look at that same 4-year time period in 3rd through 5th grade math, what that looked like in 2011-12, where we were at Southwest and how we were stagnant that year, and then you see that trajectory going up. In that 4-year period from 2012 to 2017, there's a 27% increase compared to our friends and our neighbors. But this is who we want to compete with the last year basically having a higher average of those grade levels in math. And so that's a story we're able to share in Utah, but we also want to share it as we're talking about looking at data, looking at numbers. Can it happen here? We proved it can happen here. But it has to be focused. And the same type of focus that we had in math that time, I heard in a lot of the presentation and about what's happening in literacy. And so it's a matter of time. And now I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to take that story out and share it with different groups of teachers and different campuses and really kind of make that change because you normally don't see a 27% growth in a very technical content like math. You saw it here at Southwest. So that needs to be kind of our foundation when it comes to looking at data. We can do this, and we have some teachers who have proof that we can do this. And it wasn't one thing that made that happen. It was multiple things. It wasn't one teacher, multiple teachers. It wasn't one principal, it was multiple principals. And so that's where we want to tell our story. But before we leave here, because I know we heard some really kind of data from the accountability system, that can't define us, but this definitely can define us a lot better of where we're going.
I knew about this, but why haven't I seen it posted around here? Why don't you put it on the door? Everybody walks in the front door, and there it is.
Yeah.
Did you send it to Brian?
No, I'm kidding, but in other words, people don't know about it.
Brian,
You know, you need to make
yeah, we should
some way
celebrate these
where it
things,
gets
right?
out.
Good point. Point well taken, sir.
That's fine, just put it on my back and I'll walk around, everybody can see it. What else do you have, sir?
Come on.
All right, we're adjourned at 1:20.